When I married my second husband, I thought I was stepping into stability. A man in his early 60s, settled, gentle, and content with routine. His house became mine, and in that house was a photo of a young man I'd never met, his grandson from his first marriage. I didn't think much of it until a month ago, when that grandson moved in. He was 19, tall, lean, with dark hair that curled just enough at the ends to look careless and perfect. His mother was in rehab, and my husband offered to take him in while she got help. I agreed, not out of kindness but indifference. I didn't expect to feel anything at all. But something shifted the moment he arrived. He didn't treat me like some replacement matriarch. He barely looked at me that first day, dropping his duffel bag by the stairs and giving a nonchalant nod. And yet, that disinterest scratched at me. I was polite. Too polite. I offered coffee, asked about his classes, told him where the towels were. He mumbled replies and spent most of his time in the basement or garage. He was always fixing things. My husband said he was good with tools and chuckled. I didn't laugh. I just nodded and filed that phrase away in my mind. 3 days after he moved in, I passed him in the hallway wearing a robe. Nothing else. I didn't realize he was coming out of the laundry room. His eyes dropped, then met mine. Not a word. Not a flinch. Just one long, calm glance before he stepped aside. After that, he was everywhere. Not intentionally. It just felt that way. Fixing the loose kitchen drawer. Tightening something under the sink. Adjusting the shower handle that had been wobbly for months. My husband called it a blessing to have a man around who actually got things done. I noticed the way his shirt stuck to his back when he bent over. The sharpness of his jaw when he was concentrating. How he never knocked before entering any room. He just assumed space belonged to him. He was 19. My step-grandson. The label alone should have killed the thought before it bloomed. But it didn't. It only made it darker. More vivid. I started finding reasons to be around him, bringing down a folded pile of laundry I could have just left in his room. Offering lemonade I didn't drink myself. Asking about his homework, even though I had no idea what he was studying. Each time, I expected him to dismiss me. But he didn't. He listened. Quietly. Sometimes his eyes lingered longer than they should have. And once, just once, I caught him watching me walk up the stairs. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I tied my robe tighter, undid it, tied it again. I wasn't trying to be seductive. I just wanted to see myself through someone else's eyes for once. Not my husband's tired, lukewarm gaze. Someone whose pulse might actually quicken. Days blurred. Tension thickened like steam in the bathroom. He left the door half open sometimes. Maybe by accident. Maybe not. I never dared to check. Until I did. It was late. My husband had gone to bed early, as usual, knocked out from his evening scotch and blood pressure meds. I went to the hallway bathroom. His towel was hanging over the door. Water running. I meant to grab my face cream from the drawer. I pushed the door open without knocking. And there he was. He stood there, back turned, naked from the waist down. He looked over his shoulder, slowly, without covering himself. His body didn't jerk or shift. His eyes met mine, calm as ever. And then I looked down. It wasn't just size. It was the casual ownership of it. As if he knew exactly what he was doing, standing there, dripping, waiting. Not even flinching. I didn't speak. My hand stayed on the doorknob. I stared, just a few seconds longer than decency allowed, then stepped back and pulled the door shut. I didn't breathe until I was halfway down the hall. My face burned. My chest heaved, but not from fear. Not from shame. From something so deep it frightened me. I expected to feel panic. But what I felt instead was hunger. I went to bed that night trembling. My husband snored beside me like a man with no idea that his wife had just been handed the key to a locked part of herself she thought was long gone. And I hadn't even turned it yet. The next morning, I couldn't meet his eyes. I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual, stirring coffee I didn't plan to drink, listening for footsteps that didn't come. He was quiet too, kept himself the entire day. No acknowledgement, no smirk, no tease. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was irritated. I wanted a reaction. Something to make me feel like I hadn't imagined everything the night before. I watched my husband kiss me on the cheek before heading out. Same spot. Same pressure. Barely there. I used to think it was sweet. Now it felt like an apology for forgetting what affection should feel like. By late afternoon, I was restless. I checked the bathroom door every time I passed, as if expecting him to recreate the moment. He didn't. But he left a mark in my mind I couldn't wash off. I kept seeing him, the way he didn't cover himself like he wanted me to look, like he knew I would. That night, I was in the pantry when he came up behind me. Close. I felt his breath before I heard his voice. You saw something you liked? I froze. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't playing. He knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't mean to. I started, but even I didn't believe it. I left the door open on purpose, he said. My throat dried. Why? He stepped closer. Because I wanted to know if you'd look. I should have shut it down. I should have told him he was being inappropriate, that this was dangerous, disrespectful, sick. But I didn't. I didn't say anything at all. He looked at me like he'd already won. Not with arrogance, but certainty. It was terrifying and intoxicating. I started avoiding my husband after that. Not because I feared he'd notice something. He was too checked out to suspect anything, but because I couldn't stand the contrast. His presence reminded me of everything I didn't feel anymore. Everything that had turned into dust between us. The sex that hadn't happened in over a year. The forced smiles. The way he never noticed when I wore perfume. My step-grandson noticed. He noticed everything. The curve of my neck. The hem of my dress. The way I bit the inside of my cheek when I was nervous. One night, he walked in while I was folding laundry in the guest room. I wasn't wearing a bra. I could have covered up. I didn't. He reached for a shirt in the pile and brushed against me. Slow. Deliberate. Accident, he said, not bothering to make it sound convincing. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch between us. The longer it lasted, the more electric it became. I felt like a matchbox ready to spark. His hand came to rest on the edge of the table beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I didn't. He leaned in, not to kiss, just to watch me breathe. He was studying me like I was the answer to a question he'd never asked out loud. I swallowed hard, turned away, and left the room. But that wasn't the end. Later that night, I heard soft footsteps outside my door. I opened it. He stood there, shirtless, holding a toolbox. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But I didn't. Because I knew exactly what that box represented. Something wrong with your lamp? He asked, not smiling. I stepped aside. He walked in like he belonged there. We didn't speak as he set the box down. Didn't speak as I sat on the edge of the bed. I should have said no. I should have told him to leave. Instead, I reached for his wrist and placed his hand on my knee. He didn't rush. He just stood there, waiting for something. Permission, maybe. Or surrender. I gave him both. He kissed me slow. Purposeful. Not like someone eager to take, but someone determined to be remembered. Every movement was calculated, not clumsy like a teenager, not hurried like a fling. He knew what he was doing. And he wanted me to know it too. I didn't stop him when his mouth found my neck. I didn't stop myself when I moaned quietly into his chest. My hands moved on instinct. I touched what I'd seen. I took it in my hands. I tasted it. He watched me the whole time. Not with pride. Not with amusement. With reverence. Like he couldn't believe I was real. I shouldn't have enjoyed it that much. But I did. Every second. Every sound. Every taste. When it was over, I didn't ask him to leave. I didn't say anything. I just lay back on the bed, flushed and breathless, while he gathered his things and walked out without a word. I slept like the dead that night. Not from peace, but from emotional exhaustion. My body had done something my mind still hadn't processed. I crossed a line I didn't know I was willing to cross. And there was no walking it back. The next morning, my husband kissed my cheek again. Same spot. Same pressure. But I didn't feel it this time. Not even a little. He didn't come to my room the next night. He didn't text, didn't linger in the hallway, didn't even glance in my direction over breakfast. I hated how much that bothered me. I wasn't supposed to want more. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, a dark indulgence that would dissolve in silence. But silence only made it worse. I tried focusing on chores. I reorganized the kitchen cabinets, rewashed clean sheets, stared at my phone without reason. Every time the floor creaked, my body responded. I hated how trained I'd become, like a schoolgirl waiting for a secret note under the desk. The following evening, I found him in the garage, shirt off, wiping his hands with a rag. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but he beat me to it. "Nothing's changed," he said calmly, not even looking up. "You're still pretending." I didn't respond. I couldn't. He wasn't wrong. I had gone back to pretending to be a wife, playing my role in a life I had grown numb to. I went through the motions with my husband. Cooked, cleaned, answered questions with half-interest, smiled on cue. But inside, everything had shifted. I started imagining things. What if I'd met him differently? What if he wasn't tied to me by blood through marriage? What if I wasn't wearing a ring? I hated that these weren't fleeting thoughts. They stayed. They multiplied. He cornered me in the hallway a few nights later. No pretense this time. His eyes burned into mine with quiet demand. "Do you want me to stop?" "No." It was the first honest word I'd spoken in days. That night, we didn't rush. We didn't fumble. It wasn't just lust, it was intentional. His mouth moved over me, like a man worshipping a myth. Every breath, every grip, every sound felt calculated to ruin me in the most permanent way. I let it happen. I encouraged it. I asked for more. We didn't speak when it was over. There were no promises. No guilt-ridden whispers. Just the sound of our breathing in the dark and the weight of everything we weren't saying. I lay awake long after he left, staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband snore in the other room. I felt nothing for him, not even hatred, just distance. I started dreaming about the boy. Every night, in different ways, some quiet, some feral. I would wake up aching, flushed, and furious with myself. But that fire wouldn't leave. Not during the day, not when I looked at him across the living room, not even when I was with my husband. Especially not then. We were never careless. But that didn't mean we were safe. One afternoon, I found a pair of his boxers in the laundry I was folding. They weren't hidden, just casually mixed in with the rest. My husband walked in behind me and started talking about dinner. I nodded and hummed at the right places, but all I could think about was the scent still clinging to the fabric in my hands. It wasn't just physical anymore. I hated how much I wanted to be around him. I listened for his footsteps. I adjusted my schedule to match his. I laughed at things he said just to hear him say more. I found myself asking about his day, his friends, his plans, like some pathetic schoolgirl with a crush. He noticed. Of course he did. "I'm not a secret you'll be able to bury," he said one night, voice low and sharp. "I'm not trying to bury you," I whispered. "Then what are we doing?" I didn't have an answer. My husband kissed me later that evening. For real. Lips to lips. I let him. He said I looked beautiful in blue. I thanked him. Then I excused myself and locked the bathroom door behind me. I didn't cry. I just stared at myself, wondering what he'd say if he ever knew the truth. Wondering if he'd even care. We started making excuses to be alone. Late-night errands. Helping with repairs. Quick, breathless moments in parked cars. My heart would hammer every time, not from fear of being caught, but from knowing I didn't care if we were. He started texting me late. Not explicit, just enough to remind me he was thinking about me. "Still up? Missed the taste of you." Wearing those same shorts again. I never answered right away. I wanted him to sweat, but I always answered. One night, I asked him why me. There were girls his age, prettier, easier, less complicated. "You're not like them," he said. "You're dangerous. And you pretend not to be." I wanted to feel insulted, but all I felt was exposed. We had sex in the laundry room. Quick, urgent, reckless. I told myself it was the last time. I told myself I needed to stop before it turned into something real. but it already had. I was lying to everyone, especially myself. I kept comparing. Every touch from my husband became a measurement. Every compliment, every conversation, every mundane moment. Held up next to the boy, it all collapsed. I stopped feeling bad. I started wanting more. The tension didn't fade. It thickened. We had crossed too many lines to pretend there were any left. Every interaction now carried weight, subtext buried in glances, messages behind every touch. We didn't need to speak it aloud. We were living in it. My husband remained oblivious. He praised the boy for how helpful he was, said he was proud to have him around, talked about what a good influence he'd become. I played along, smiled at the right times, nodded while my stomach turned. He was praising the same boy who was marking my skin in places he'd long forgotten how to touch. We were reckless now, less careful. I caught myself staring too long when we were in the same room. I laughed too easily at his jokes. I reached across him in the kitchen just to feel his heat. He stopped waiting for permission. His hand would slide along the small of my back, fingers grazing in ways too intimate for public spaces. And I let him. I welcomed it. I started making up errands just to get away with him. Told my husband I needed help carrying groceries, picking up paint, checking the car. Anything. He never questioned it. Trusted me. That made it worse. The guilt didn't stop me. It just reminded me of what I was risking. And I still wanted more. One afternoon, I looked at the boy and realized I didn't know where this would end. I didn't want to. The thought of it stopping made my chest ache. I wasn't in control anymore. I'd convinced myself I was in the beginning, that I could decide when it started and ended. But he had taken that from me, without ever asking. And I had handed it over, willingly. He started pushing boundaries, calling me at odd hours, sending pictures, not explicit, just bold enough to make me clench the phone tighter, posing shirtless in the mirror, leaning back in bed with the sheet pulled low. He knew what he was doing, knew what it did to me. I never told him to stop. One night, he asked if I'd leave my husband. The question wasn't heavy. It was casual, almost teasing. But I felt it land. I hesitated too long. He noticed. That's what I thought, he said, quiet and unreadable. It stuck with me. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that he was just a boy playing with fire, that this would burn itself out eventually. But I knew better. I'd passed the point of no return months ago. I was living in the aftermath already. He grew distant after that. Not cold, just less available. No more spontaneous visits to my room. Fewer texts. Less time in the house. He started staying out later. I noticed the shift before I admitted it. And it cut deeper than I expected. One night, I waited for him. He didn't come. I stared at the door until my eyes blurred. The silence felt like punishment. I told myself it was better this way. I told myself this is what I wanted, to end it before it unraveled everything. But it already had, and I hadn't prepared for what that would feel like. He came home late, smelling like someone else's perfume. He didn't speak to me, just walked past. My chest tightened. I hated how much it bothered me. I had no right to be jealous, no right to feel abandoned. But I did. I confronted him the next day, asked where he'd been. He raised a brow, amused. You don't get to ask that, he said. I wanted to slap him, or kiss him, or both. You started this, I snapped. You let it happen. We stood in silence, both too proud to back down. I saw something shift in him, disappointment, maybe, or clarity. He walked away before I could read it fully. The next week was agony. Cold glances. No touches. Silence thicker than any words we could have exchanged. I stopped sleeping. I stopped pretending. I was unraveling. Then one night, he appeared in my doorway again. No words. Just him. And I broke. We didn't touch. We just lay side by side, staring at the ceiling, breathing the same air, drowning in it. I turned to him. Do you hate me? He looked at me for a long time. No, he whispered. I just can't figure out if you love yourself. That hit harder than anything he'd ever said. Because I didn't. And maybe that's why I let it happen. Maybe that's why I kept going, kept chasing, kept burning bridges I didn't even realize were behind me. When he left the next morning, I didn't stop him. Days passed. My husband noticed the change. Asked if I was sick. I said I was tired. He nodded, didn't press. He never did. I stood in the bathroom that night, staring at myself again. Same mirror. Same face. Different eyes. I wasn't the same. I'd tasted something that woke me up. Something I couldn't unfeel. The boy didn't come back. At least, not to me. He was still in the house, still present. But he had shut the door I thought we both needed open. I felt hollow. I wanted to scream. Or confess. Or burn it all down. But I didn't. I kissed my husband goodnight, crawled into bed, and stared into the dark, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. Not because I missed the sex, but because I missed being seen.